I was born into a world where my last name opens doors I never really cared to walk through. You could say my future was all mapped out for me. My dad runs a major company that probably flashes across stock exchange screens more often than you've heard your alarm clock ring. Yeah, that rich. But if you're imagining a story about a girl draped in designer clothes, sipping champagne for breakfast, you've got the wrong one. I've always kept my feet on the ground, real and unpretentious. Money's nice, of course, but it's not everything. I chose a different path, one that led me to experiences beyond the reach of money, charity work, helping those who need it, and living a life that's, well, ordinary. That's who I am. Just Jane. Not the heiress. Just Jane. One evening, I found myself stuck in one of those classic situations where my friend Amy decided we all needed to get out more. We ended up at this downtown dive bar, the kind where the beer's cheap and the dim lighting hides your past mistakes. Amy was buzzing, talking nonstop about a guy she met online. "You've got to meet him, Jess. He's totally your type," she insisted. My type? Since when did she know that? Anyway, we're there, and in walks a guy not the guy Amy had been talking about, but Mike. He was with his friends, standing out like a fish out of water, dressed simply in a tee and jeans, with a smile that made the place feel a little warmer. We started chatting, and it was effortless, like a conversation with an old friend. He worked as a manager at some place I'd never heard of, not glamorous, but he spoke about it with a kind of enthusiasm that was contagious. "You really enjoy your job, huh?" I asked, taking a sip of my third beer. "Definitely," he said, leaning in with a grin. "Every day's a challenge, but hey, I'm not here to bore you with work talk. What about you? Amy mentioned something about charity work." I shrugged, downplaying it. "Yeah, a little of this, a little of that, just doing my part." "That's awesome," he said, and I could tell he wasn't just being polite, he genuinely meant it. As the night wore on, our group mingled, but Mike and I stuck together, talking about everything and nothing at all. It was refreshing, no one trying to sell me an investment or boast about their latest purchases. As the evening drew to a close, Mike got this look in his eyes, like he was about to say something big. "Hey Jane, I know this might sound forward, but would you want to grab dinner sometime, just the two of us?" His question caught me off guard but also excited me. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I'd like that." On the ride home, Amy was all smiles and, "I told you so." I just grinned, thinking about the night. Mike felt like a breath of fresh air in my sometimes stale world. Little did I know, things were about to shift in ways I didn't expect. Soon, hanging out meant spending time at each other's places, mostly mine, since Mike's roommates were a whole circus in themselves. One evening, after we'd demolished what could only be described as the world's most average pizza, Mike turned to me, his expression serious, though his tone was light. "Jane, how would you feel about making this more permanent?" he asked, crumbs still on his lips. I raised an eyebrow. "You proposing we share a Netflix account or something?" "More like..." He laughed, brushing off the crumbs. "I was thinking more along the lines of life together. But hey, we can start with Netflix." The simplicity of it, all the directness, with no over-the-top gestures or dramatic moments, just us in our element, felt right. Mike, if you're asking what I think you're asking, yes. 1,000 times, yes. And just like that, with the scent of cheap pizza lingering in the air, we decided to make it official. It was swift, sure, but when you know, you know. Telling our families was the next hurdle. My folks, well, they've always been about the "as long as you're happy" mantra, but this was putting it to the test. Dad, with his business empire, and Mom, the socialite, they had visions of me settling down with someone more in our circle. I broke the news over dinner, the fancy kind where you're not sure which fork to use for the salad. "Mom, Dad, I'm getting married to Mike," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Dad paused, fork midair. "Mike, the manager chap? Well, that's quick." Mom simply smiled, a bit too tightly. "Dear, Are you sure? This is rather sudden, isn't it? But I was firm. Yes, I'm sure. He's amazing, and we're really happy together. Their skepticism was palpable, but so was their love. Well, if he makes you happy, darling, Mom conceded, and Dad nodded in agreement. Mike's folks were a whole different ballgame. We went over to their place, a cozy little house that seemed always to smell like fresh cookies or something equally comforting. Judy and Martin, they were as down-to-earth as they come, and they welcomed me like I'd always been a part of the family. Mike tells us you're setting a date, Martin asked, passing me a plate of those infamous cookies. Yes, we're thinking sooner rather than later. Small ceremony, nothing fancy, I replied, trying to gauge their reaction. Judy beamed. Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. We're just thrilled for you both. Their warmth was enveloping, a stark contrast to the cautious optimism of my own parents. It was clear, right from the get-go, that our worlds were different, but the common ground was the genuine happiness for me and Mike. Planning the wedding, we were on the same page. Keep it simple, keep it us. A small ceremony, close friends and family, and an open bar because, as Mike put it, if we're doing this, we're making sure everyone's having a good time. And that's how it went down. A swift engagement, not because we were rushing, but because everything just clicked into place. Amid the whirlwind, there were quiet moments, looks shared between us that said, we're doing the right thing. And we really were. Living with Mike started off as everything I'd hoped for and more. We were like two peas in a pod, making our little corner of the world in that cozy, modern apartment I had rented. It was ours, filled with love, laughter, and a ton of takeout containers because, let's face it, neither of us were winning any awards in the kitchen. It wasn't long before I started noticing how Mike's parents, Judy and Martin, had this way of dropping hints about things they liked or needed whenever they came over. At first, it was subtle, almost cute. Oh, Jane, that's a lovely coffee maker. Must make mornings a breeze, Judy would say, eyeing our shiny new appliance with a gleam in her eye. Or, Martin, this sofa is just divine. Our old one's been giving me a right pain in the back, you know. Wanting to be the good daughter-in-law, I'd surprise them with gifts here and there. A coffee maker for Judy, a comfortable new sofa for their living room, and so on. Their initial reactions were always the same, a mix of surprise and a little bit of guilt. Oh, Jane, you shouldn't have. This is too much, Judy would exclaim, her hands fluttering to her chest. But, you know, humans are funny creatures. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Those initial protests faded away, replaced by a growing list of subtle hints that were about as subtle as a brick through a window. Dinner at your folks' place was lovely, dear. Did you see that new TV they have? Crystal clear. Ours is practically ancient, Mike would relay, his parents' latest comments, oblivious to the change in their tone. One evening, after I'd just dropped a hefty sum on a fancy new TV for Mike's parents, we were curled up together on the couch. My head was resting on his lap, and he gently ran his fingers through my hair. They really love the TV, babe. You're amazing, you know that? He said, his voice soft. I sighed, feeling the weight of their expectations starting to press on me. Mike, do they expect us to keep doing this? It's starting to feel a little much, don't you think? He paused, his hand halting mid-motion. What do you mean? They're just happy, that's all. Happy? Or taking advantage? I countered, sitting up to face him. It's like we're their personal shopping service. Mike looked taken aback, his brow furrowing in confusion. They're not like that, Jess. They just aren't used to nice things, that's all. But where does it stop, Mike? I pushed, frustration creeping into my voice. It feels like they've gotten a taste for it now, and they're not looking back. The conversation ended with an uneasy truce, but it was obvious we were seeing things from very different perspectives. Judy and Martin's gratitude had shifted into entitlement, and it was starting to strain not only our relationship but my own peace of mind. I loved Mike, But I wasn't about to become a never-ending ATM for his parents. Then, when my dad's company hit a major slump, it felt like everything I'd known was swept away in an instant. The comfortable life I'd taken for granted was gone, and suddenly, the foundation of my relationship with Mike was shaken. The change wasn't gradual, it was like flipping a switch from light to dark. I had to tell Mike and his parents, and it was a conversation I dreaded more than anything. Listen, things are going to get tight. Dad's company is struggling, and we're in for a rough patch, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the tremble beneath it. Mike's reaction hit like a punch to the gut. You're kidding, right? What do you mean things are going to get tight? You're telling me we can't live like we used to because of your dad's mess? His words were cold as ice, and for a moment, I wished the floor would just swallow me up. Judy and Martin's faces reflected the same disappointment, only thinly veiled. This is quite the situation you've put us in, Jane, Martin said, his tone loaded with reproach. And just like that, the warmth that had once filled our interactions vanished, replaced by a cold expectation that somehow I was to blame for my family's financial troubles. Moving in with them was framed as a temporary solution, but it quickly became apparent that our once independent life had been replaced by a cramped guest room in a house that felt more like a prison. The tension in the air was palpable, and every day seemed like a reminder of how I had let them down. We're cutting back on everything because of this, Judy would snap, as she served meals that were a far cry from the lavish ones we used to have. Martin would always chime in with a comment about saving money. Make sure those lights are off, we're not running a charity here. But it was Mike who was the hardest to handle. The man I married seemed to disappear, replaced by someone who now saw me as a failure. Can't you do something? Talk to your dad? It's like you don't even care we're living like this. He'd snap, anger flaring over the smallest of things. Our conversations, once easy and filled with talk of the future, had become landmines, where every word was a potential trigger for another fight. I thought marrying you meant security, not this struggle. He'd throw at me in the heat of an argument, his words cutting deep. It became clear that we weren't just dealing with financial strain, this was a test of our relationship, a harsh unveiling of who we truly were under pressure. I was caught in the middle, wrestling with my own sense of failure, while trying to navigate the growing rift between my husband and his parents. Judy's birthday dinner was supposed to be a calm, cozy family gathering at a fancy restaurant, a brief respite from the constant tension, but it quickly turned into the showdown of a lifetime. Looking back, I should have expected it the way things had been at their place. We were all sitting there, menus in hand, and I was trying to stay out of the spotlight, just fading into the background. But that plan went up in smoke the moment the orders started flying. With a grin that made my skin crawl, Mike said, "Let's get the steak and the lobster for us," then shot me a look that was part smug and part cruel. Jane can go with the soup of the day. Got to save where we can, right? His family laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Judy chimed in. Absolutely. Can't have Jane overspending now, can we? A flush of heat surged through me, not from embarrassment, but pure, unfiltered fury. Really? Soup? Is this some sick joke? I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Oh, come on, Jane, it's just a bit of fun, Mike said, that same smirk still plastered on his face. That's when I completely lost it. Fun? This is your idea of fun? When the chips are down, you just show how petty you really are. I can't believe I fell for your act. The whole restaurant went silent, and the awkwardness was palpable. I didn't sit back down. Keep your fancy dishes and your pathetic jokes. I'm out, I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair nearly toppled over. The sound of it echoed, drawing even more eyes our way. Mike reached out, trying to be the peacemaker. Jane, don't. Let's not make a scene. A scene? You think I care about making a scene after that stunt? This is about respect, something you clearly don't understand. I shot back, yanking my arm free and heading for the door. The weight of their stares followed me as I stepped outside, the cool night air feeling like freedom after being trapped in a cage. My phone started blowing up, Mike undoubtedly trying to smooth things over. I ignored it, my mind made up. I drove back to their place, my emotions a whirlwind. How had things gotten so bad? Mike and I had been a team or so, I thought. But that dinner? It was a slap in the face, a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Back at the house, I packed my bags quickly, each folded shirt a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. It wasn't just about leaving a house, it was about walking away from a relationship that had finally shown its true colors. I turned off my phone, cutting off the flood of messages. The silence that followed was eerie but oddly welcome. That night wasn't just the end of a disastrous dinner, it was the end of a chapter I had no desire to revisit. After the fallout from Judy's birthday dinner, I found myself driving to my parents' house. The night was quiet, but inside, my thoughts were anything but calm. When I pulled up to their driveway, I knew my decision was made. I needed sanctuary, but more than that, I needed advice, something only my dad could offer. Walking into the house, the familiarity of it all was both comforting and unsettling. Mom was asleep, but Dad was up, sitting in his study, surrounded by papers that seemed insignificant the moment I stepped inside. "Jane, what are you doing here at this hour? Is everything okay?" he asked, standing up with concern etched across his face. I took a deep breath, and the flood of emotions from the evening poured out. I told him about the dinner, about Mike and his parents, and how I felt like nothing more than a walking wallet to them. Dad listened silently, his expression hardening with each word. When I finished, he sighed deeply, a sound that carried both experience and sorrow. "Jane, I saw this coming. I just hoped I was wrong," he finally said, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "How could I have been so blind, Dad? I thought we were different," I said, feeling the weight of my own naivete. He walked over and placed an arm around my shoulders. "You wanted to see the best in him, in them. There's no fault in that, but people show their true selves in tough times. It's a hard lesson, but an important one." I nodded, his words sinking in. "But what do I do now? I can't go back there." "You'll stay here for now. As for the rest, we'll figure it out together," he reassured me, his confidence grounding me. Then he shared something that left me stunned. "You know, the company situation isn't as bad as it seems. We're actually on the brink of a breakthrough. This was a strategic move, a way to weed out the opportunists." I stared at him, taken aback. "So, you mean to say we're not broke?" He chuckled, a mix of relief and amusement. "Far from it. But it was important to see who would stick around when things got tough. Unfortunately, Mike and his family revealed their true nature. That revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My anger toward Mike and his parents was now laced with a sense of vindication. They'd shown their hand, and in doing so, had freed me from a future of manipulation and deceit. "Dad, I don't know whether to be relieved or furious," I admitted, the emotions swirling within me. "Be both. It's okay. But remember, this experience has taught you something invaluable about people and their intentions. Use it. Learn from it," he advised, grounding me in the midst of the storm. Walking up to Judy and Martin's house the next day felt like stepping straight into the lion's den. I was bracing myself for a confrontation, but nothing could have prepared me for the icy reception I was about to get. There stood Mike, divorce papers in hand, wearing a look of triumph mixed with disdain. "Here you go, let's get this over with," he said, practically thrusting the papers at me. Behind him, his parents lingered, their barely contained glee obvious they were finally getting rid of the freeloader. Judy snickered, and Martin gave me a knowing nod, a smug grin plastered across his face. Mike joined in, his voice dripping with malice. "Yeah, turns out you're just an ordinary idiot without your daddy's money. Thought you'd cry, but guess what? We don't need a tearful mess around here." Their words stung, but not in the way they expected. I felt a strange mix of anger and liberation. I glanced at the papers, then at them, and without a word signed where I needed to. Their smiles grew wider, thinking they had won, but I had the final laugh. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a newspaper and slammed it down on the table with more force than necessary. "Thought you might find this interesting," I said, my voice oozing with satisfaction. The headline boldly announced my dad's company making a massive comeback, profits soaring higher than ever. Watching their faces drain of color was priceless. Judy and Martin's smugness melted away, replaced by shock, then desperation. Mike's arrogance crumbled, leaving him looking like a child who just lost his favorite toy. Judy, suddenly sweet as pie, moved toward me with arms wide open. "Oh, my sweet girl, it's all a misunderstanding. Let's hug it out." Martin, always the opportunist, jumped in. "Let's not rush things, sit down, have a coffee, and we can talk this through." And Mike? He was the picture of regret. "I was wrong, okay? We can fix this. I want to make everything right, please." Their sudden turnaround was almost comical. Almost. I couldn't help but laugh. A deep, cleansing laugh. "You three are something else, you know that? But here's the deal. I'm done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, and the so-called family that only values me for my bank account." I turned to leave, their pleas and protests fading into the background. They called after me, a mixture of desperation and disbelief in their voices, but I didn't look back, not this time. After the spectacle at Judy and Martin's, I was done, not just with them, but with the entire mess that had been my life. I needed a fresh start, a clean slate. I took some time at my parents' house, getting my head straight and my heart back in the game. A couple of weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was having coffee with Amy, my ever-supportive friend, who'd been by my side through it all. "Girl, you look like a weight's been lifted," she said, sipping her latte. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "You have no idea, it's like I can finally breathe again." Amy leaned in, her expression turning serious. "So, what's next for you, Jess? You've got a clean slate now?" I stirred my coffee absent-mindedly, thinking. I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. Maybe I'll travel, pick up some of the charity work I had to put on hold. As for love, I paused, giving her a wry smile. I think I'll skip that for a while. Just make sure you're doing what makes you happy, okay? You deserve it after all that drama, she said, squeezing my hand. Thanks, Amy. That's the plan. Not long after that conversation, my phone started buzzing calls and messages from Mike. He was pleading, saying he'd changed, that we could start over. His parents got in on it too, sending apologies and invitations to talk. Sitting in my room, phone in hand, I couldn't help but laugh. The sheer audacity was almost admirable, almost. I typed out a response I'd been mulling over for days. "Mike, moving on means moving forward, not going back to what broke you. I wish you all the best, but this is where our paths end, for good. Take care." Hitting send felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd been stuck in for far too long. And just like that, I was ready to start writing a new one. The following months flew by in a blur of activity. I threw myself into my work, dove back into volunteering with newfound passion, and even booked a solo trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Life felt full again, and for the first time in ages, it was fulfilling too. One evening, while sitting on a balcony overlooking a busy street in a far-off city, I realized I had found what I had been searching for all along. Peace. The drama, the heartache, the betrayal. It all seemed like a distant memory. My phone buzzed with a new message, but this time it was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitant, I opened it. It was from someone I'd met during my travels, someone who'd made me laugh and think in equal measure. "Hey, Jane, how about dinner when you're back?" No expectations, just food and good company. I stared at the message, a smile slowly spreading across my face. Maybe it was time to open my heart again, but on my terms, at my pace. "Yes, I'd like that," I typed back, hitting send before I could second-guess myself. Looking out at the city lights, I felt a thrill of excitement for the future. I had moved on not just from Mike and his family, but from the person I had been when I was